and give the call to the honourable member for Menzies.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And this is my first adjournment speech, so I'm glad you're in the chair. We heard in the last 2 days the beginning of the proper debate about amending the referendum. There were 6 questions put to the Prime Minister, 5 to the Prime Minister and 1 to the Minister for Indigenous Affairs. And what struck me and concerned me was the visceral reaction from the other side, that those questions were dared to be put. No, there was visceral reaction. And I think that is a great shame, and I hope there's some reflection upon that there will be and should be more questions, not just from this side, but from all Australians, because we're asking Australians to make a very serious decision this year. There's a little book that we give school children who visit this place, and when we visit schools, about the Constitution. And it isn't just the particular provisions of our Constitution, but it also has an explanation at the front. And it's a joint initiative of the Parliamentary Education Office and the Australian Government Solicitor, and we heard some questions about the Australian Government Solicitor. And in it says this, and it's important: Australia's Constitution contains little of the soaring rhetoric which is familiar in the constitutions of many other lands. That is one of its strengths. It is a practical, matter-of-fact, unpretentious but effective document, an effective document. As such, it reflects the pragmatic, no-nonsense attitude which we like to think is among the most attractive features of the Australian character. And it goes on to say this: although Australia may be a young nation, we are one of the world's oldest democracies. It's easy to forget that. One of the world's oldest democracies. And unlike most nations which are now democracies, Australia has been a democracy from the moment we became a nation, as a federation. And in this preamble to the Constitution, it says, the Constitution is the fundamental law of Australia, binding everybody, including the Commonwealth Parliament, this place, and the Parliament of each state. Accordingly, and this is important because it wasn't reflected in the answers in the last 2 days, even an act passed by a parliament is invalid if it is contrary to the Constitution. So we saw the wording that has been proposed. And I must admit, when people asked me over the last 12 months what wording would come, I never thought it would be this radical. I really didn't. It's not modest. It's not modest. So in the 3 provisions that are put forward, the second one is a very important one. It says, the voice, and I'm paraphrasing, may make representations to the Parliament and the executive government of the Commonwealth on matters relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people. Now, matters relating to, there is broad agreement from all of those involved in the various working groups that has broad application. It's not narrowed to the particular minister, broad application. And then the Prime Minister and many commentators referred to the third part as being the bit that checks any justiciability of that. And it says the Parliament shall, subject to this Constitution, and that's the bit that's left out in all the answers, subject to this Constitution, have power to make laws with respect to matters relating to. Now that, we are told, is what will protect the possibility, and I would submit probability, that there will be, in Part 2, an implied obligation to consult. Because in administrative law, when you have a right to be heard, you don't have that right unless you know there is something to be heard about. So in order to know that there's something to be heard about, there must be an obligation to consult. And then if there's any check on that implied constitutional obligation by this place, because it is subject to the Parliament, so subject to the Constitution, it will be ruled invalid. It will be ruled invalid. So when the questions are put from this side and indeed throughout this nation about justiciability, they are serious questions that should be answered. And it concerns me that they haven't been asked and answered on the side of the government. And that will be an important task of the upcoming Joint Select Committee. It will be an important task of this campaign. And we were told weeks ago that the Karma Langton report had the answers. That said, non-justiciability is an essential feature. A view, weeks later we were told, reeked of subconscious racism. It's time to answer questions.